I am Marita Gilbert. I am Associate Dean for Diversity and Campus Inclusion at MSU's College of Osteopathic Medicine. I'm also a co-chair of our DEIJ subcommittee. I have to start this morning with a bit of a pause because admittedly, our hearts are heavy in our community. We are Spartan strong, but that does not mean that we aren't human. We are grieving because 5 were injured last week and we lost 3 lives in a senseless act of violence on our campus. And so in this moment, I want to speak the names of Ariel Anderson, Brian Fraser, Alexandria Verner, and of course, offer our continued support to all of those who are still recovering. I'm going to ask that we pause for a moment of silence as we send our thoughts to each of them and to their families. Thank you all. I also want to begin by reading the MSU land acknowledgement. Michigan State University occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. In particular, the university resides on land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. We recognize Michigan's 12 federally recognized Native nations, historic indigenous communities in Michigan, excuse me, individual indigenous communities, those who live here now, and those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences. So anytime we do the land acknowledgement, I always like to say that this is our start and not our stopping place, right? That we continue to do the work to acknowledge and affirm those who came before us. Now, the DEIJ subcommittee is excited to launch this series. Again, very early on, we determined, I'm not gonna say we decided, we determined that we were not merely going to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, but we needed to lead in the capacity building so that we could actually do the work. So we're excited this morning because Dr. Hrabowski embodies the best and promising practices for the work we're seeking to do. So today, again, is only the beginning. I'm going to invite my co-chair, Dr. Henry Lim, to introduce 2 of our panelists.
Thank you very much, Marita. When Dr. Gilbert, myself, and the committee decided to look at speakers for this series, I think it was our unanimous choice for Dr. Hrabowski to be the inaugural speaker. Dr. Hrabowski is the president of University of Maryland, Baltimore campus since 1992, probably one of the longest serving university presidents in the country. He had been very, very accomplished in transforming the university into a leading producer of Black bachelor's degree recipient who go on to earn MD, PhD. In 1998, he co-founded the Meyerhoff Scholars Program, which is open to students of all backgrounds who are interested in addressing the issues of underrepresentation. He has been on multiple very prominent national committees, including committees in national academies, including being named by President Obama to President's Advisory Commission on Education Excellence for African American. And in 2012, he was named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine. Many of us have read his book on Empowered University, which is very, very informative and educational book, at least for me. In 2022, he was elected to the National Academies of Engineering. This is one of the highest honor for those of us in academic medicine, academic activities in the university. And he, in 2022, Howard Hughes Medical Institute pledged $1.5 billion to support early career scientists, increase diversity in STEM through the initiative Freedman Hrabowski Scholars Program. So with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Hrabowski to give his presentation.
Do you talk at all before I do, or do I get started now?
Well, we probably should tell them who you will be talking with. So,
Okay.
Dr. Lim, would you like to introduce Dr. Munkara?
Absolutely. We'll start with Dr. Munkara then. Dr. Munkara, I've known Dr. Munkara since he came to Henry Ford, only 2 years ago. He is the Executive Vice President and Chief Clinical Officer at Henry Ford Health. He, by training, is a gynecology oncologist, and he provides supervision for the health system, population health, and accountable care strategies. He's really the top doc, essentially, within the health in Henry Ford Health. And he has published multiple articles, book chapters, had given multiple lectures nationally as well as internationally, very well recognized physician. And he is a graduate of American University in Beirut and trained in medicine and OBGYN at Wayne, and then did his fellowship at MD Anderson, University of Texas. So, and the other panelists is you'll introduce.
So our other panelist is Dr. Norm Beauchamp. He was recently promoted to MSU Executive Vice President for Health Sciences in October 2019, after serving as Associate Provost and Assistant Vice President for Health Affairs for Michigan State University since February 2018, and then Dean of the college, the MSU College of Human Medicine, since 2016. Like Dr. Lim, I have to say, Dr. Beauchamp is also partly responsible for me coming to MSU during the pandemic and not waiting the extra 3 months. He greenlit Dean Amalfitano's bringing me here early, so thank you. Before coming to MSU, Dr. Beauchamp held academic medicine leadership positions at Johns Hopkins University and the University of Washington, where he served as president of the prestigious UW clinical practice of 1,600 physicians employed by the university. Dr. Beauchamp is an influential scientist and national leader in the radiology community. He's going to kill me for reading this whole thing. Has received numerous awards for his research and has published more than 100 peer-reviewed papers. His research focuses on developing advanced MRI imaging techniques to extend the treatment window for acute ischemic stroke and to identify risk predictors for stroke and dementia. Dr. Beauchamp is the past chair of the International Outreach Committee of the American Roentgen Ray Society. Did I butcher it? Okay. And previously served on the board of directors of the Society of Chairs of Academic Radiology Departments. He's also the past president of both of those organizations. He was the chairperson of the Radiology Research Alliance, the Coalition for Bioimaging Research, and the American Radiology Education Committee. So these are our panelists, and we invite you to have your conversation. Would you like to say something?
Yep. So I'm going to make a few comments, and I'd much rather have exchange and conversation. The president of Stanford some years ago asked college presidents this question: how long can college students focus in a lecture before they fade away somehow? What would be your answer? What do you think? How long? I heard 5-6 minutes. Anybody else? It's about 8 minutes. And then, as my neuroscience friends at NIH will say, how long can a very disciplined professional respond or continue to be focused before they begin to fade away? What do you think? What's maximum number? 20 minutes, at most. And yet we tend to have 50-minute lectures, right? You know what I'm saying? So I've always thought about that, and so I always enjoy breaking things up. Let me make some very basic comments. Number one, particularly during this time, let me say that wherever I've gone, and they've heard I've come into MSU, and I'll say this evening too, people ask me to say we are praying for this campus. We have great respect for you and what you're doing. I start with that. Secondly, many people don't realize that these issues of D&I and DE&I are issues that have become more pronounced and more prominent in more recent years, but this is a 60-year experiment. I'll ask you one question. What percent of Americans do you think had graduated from college in the mid-60s? What do you think?
10%?
I heard 40, 50,
10?
15, 20. I can tell you are a fairly risk-adverse group. You're accustomed to waiting until you know the answer before you say it, because you got A's in school. I know. But believe it or not, and I'm going to talk about this evening, only 10% of Americans had graduated from college, and at that time, everything was broken down into black and white, as you know. And so, what percent of blacks do you think had graduated from college? 3%, yep, and they were mainly at the HBCUs. And for whites, what do you think? You really are risk adverse. Just guess. 20? Anybody else? Now, why don't I just tell you the answers? Why is it that I didn't just tell you what it was? Why did I ask you the questions? So you would think. And I say this in a metacognitive way. As we think about these questions of representation, I want us to think about the questions we've not thought about before. I want us to think about the questions we've not thought about. Only 11% of whites had graduated from college. So 90% of Americans didn't expect kids to go to college. It was only with the Pell Grant in the early 70s that we began to do that. Now, why is that important? Well, you can't get to talking about professions, med school, nurses. I mean, there's still the AA nurses, for example, but no, nobody had done it. So nobody expected their kids to go health profession. Today, by the way, a third have graduated from college. The highest achieving group will be of Asian background, particular Asian groups, though, not others. Indian and Chinese first, right? My campus is most heavily 30-some% of Asian background. The black population is maybe 18%. And I tell you all of that for this reason. As we think about building diversity and building an inclusive healthcare profession across areas, it's important to think about who goes to college, how they do in college, who knows what the opportunities are. And so the work that I've been focused on for the past 40 years has really been about seeing how we can prove to ourselves as a nation that we can see students from underrepresented groups excelling in math and science. My background is math. I get goosebumps doing math. Goosebumps. Now let me just ask all of you a question. How many of you love math? Pretty nerdy group, about 40%. You know, on my campus, math rocks. It really does. You see somebody who's in math, you just kind of bow, you know, because it's at the foundation. You can't become a doctor, a nurse, if you don't have that fundamental math background. And as I always say, if you look at problems, whether they're in engineering or in nursing, the fact is we don't express problems in numbers. We express problems in words. And then you translate from the words to equations. Right? And why am I saying that? Because I would say a strong background in reading and thinking and in the quantitative areas will be very important. And so I want us to think about what I said in my TED Talk as we talk today. These 4 pillars of success. And what I say in science, I mean in healthcare areas in general. Well, they're talking about working with the partnership, the Henry Ford side, the med side, the 2 med schools, the other healthcare professions. It is first high expectations, but not just of the students, of ourselves. I just give you one point. If I put a problem on the board in differential equations, and I solve the problem, and everybody says, well, he did that. That was quite elegant, an elegant proof. And everybody's impressed. And then I give you a test on that problem, on that concept, and nobody passes. Did I teach it? No. But you see, in STEM, and I'm calling all of healthcare STEM related, all right? In STEM, if I put it on the board, if I say it, I've taught it. That is the way we think. But we really don't haven't taught until we see people grabbing the concept, understanding the concept. Now, you are more advantaged than some of us in science in that usually there are a lot of tests you take along the way and board exams, and then you really know whether people have done it or not. One of my chair of chemistry years ago had come from being a professor in the med school at Hopkins, and she said, it's really hard to get into any med school. And yet, once you get in, you've got a really good chance of making it. Even if you don't do well, they may give you another year. But it's easy to get into science. It's hard to graduate in science. And so what the National Academy's report showed was that only 1/3 of students who start in STEM in our country actually graduate with a bachelor's in STEM. And so one of my points today, as you think about health professions, as you think about workforce, is look at that undergrad experience. I know we need to look at pre-K through 12. I get that. But our study showed that the majority of people who start off with an interest in becoming a doctor, a nurse, or whatever, leave it. And people say, well, they leave it because maybe they can make more money in business. No, they leave it because they get C's or below in chemistry. And that's not just in some schools. In fact, the higher the test scores, SATs, I wrote that in those math questions for the SAT years ago, the higher the test scores, the more prestigious the university one attends, the greater the probability the student who starts off in STEM will leave it. So when we're all proud of people who go to the East, whatever, they start off to become great doctors, they become great lawyers. And the reason is math and science work is unpredictable. I give you 5 problems, 3 you've seen before, 2 you've never seen before, they're changed. You get a D, and you say, oh my God, but I'm writing well, so I go to English, I go to humanities, and I become a lawyer. Because that's the other, people think healthcare or they think law, in terms of professions, you get my point. And our challenge in our country when somebody said, well, why is this important? Only 5% of our bachelor's degrees are in the natural sciences and engineering. In Europe, it's about 11%. So you start with a smaller pool. And now when you get to minorities, it's even larger. So I'm going to stop with this idea of the high expectations of building community. Some med schools have worked harder to look at collaborative learning. We don't do that in America in general. And then it takes the professional to pull others into the profession. Whatever that profession is, you've got to pull people in lab work, in clinical whatever. Very important. People don't realize how important that is. And finally, rigorous evaluation. We've all been doing a lot of work to increase this diversity, and yet we've not succeeded. And that's where the Empowered University comes in, the idea of how do we look in the mirror, be empowered to look in the mirror and to be honest with ourselves. Yeah, we've got a lot of activity, but we're not seeing the representation. We need to see. The reason Howard Hughes decided to do this special program is they know that under 2% of the HHMI investigators at most are black. When you look at the national academies, I said this when I was speaking to a group of Howard Hughes investigators who were also in the national academies. I said, I'll know we've made progress in this country when the intersection of your groups, the national academies and HHMI, and my race is not the null set. It's just that small. You get my point? And all of a sudden, and here was the telling point, everybody looked around. They didn't realize there was nobody black in the room but me. Okay? And the number of women, not what it should be. So as we think about underrepresentation, it is about women. It's about first-generation college. It is about people of color, those groups. Let me stop there, and let's get into some conversation. Okay?
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Now I could talk on forever. I really could. But presidents are like politicians. We can talk forever. But no, I'd rather have exchange and then get into some of the substance.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Who wants to ask me the first question?
Well, I'll just make a few comments.
Okay.
And just there's a great quote that if your words and actions cause people to learn more, believe more, dream more, and do more, you're a leader. You really epitomize that, and it is such a blessing for us to have you here. And I can tell you, I was so excited when I learned you were coming because I was in Baltimore in '91. You became president in '92, and your work really echoed in the community and just inspired people that excellence is accessible to everyone.
Yes.
And it's been wonderful. And so I would just product placement. This
love it.
book.
I gave him $5 too.
Now, what I'd say though, my wife has already told me that I wrecked the book because I just kept highlighting.
I love it.
Every time I
love
learn
it.
something, I'm like, well,
I
there's
love
a
it.
highlight.
I
So
love it.
anyhow,
By the way, and the intersect, you know I've got math everywhere, so you see that, remember the Venn diagram idea? You see the intersection. And that subtitle is Shared Leadership, Culture Change, and Academic Success. And we can talk about that today, okay?
absolutely wonderful.
Great,
So
thank you.
honored to have you here. We were asked to just comment a little bit about our organization, but
Yes.
we had a chance to touch on that.
Yep.
But I think that fundamentally, what we were talking about is why does inclusive excellence matter in
Yes.
terms of health outcomes?
Yes.
And I think if you go back
Yes.
30, 40 years ago, there was a large disparity between health outcomes for women and for men.
Yep.
And when the number of doctors became balanced with women and men, those health disparities largely collapsed. There's still some work to do. But when we look at the limited number of people of color in medicine, it very much is why, or it's one of the big drivers
Yes.
of why we have this
Sure.
persistent gap
Sure.
in addressing the health needs of communities. And so we have to go directly at having more doctors and more nurses that look like the communities they serve. And that is something we're going directly at. And what is marvelous about this coming together is for Michigan State University, we have 50,000 students. We, like University of Maryland, Baltimore County, we're a public institution,
Yes.
which means our goal is
Yes.
to be accessible to all.
Yes.
Accessible to all.
Yeah.
And combining that then with our medical school and our nursing program, we graduated more students from underrepresented communities than the other 5 medical schools in our state combined. So we're intentional and we're going directly at it. But a key part of that is the students from STEM finding their
Yes.
way.
Yes.
And your work, where UMBC graduates the largest number in the country
Yes.
of MD PhDs, right? How you've done that is really important to us as we seek to connect.
Sure.
But then, for us, the next piece was, could we connect this undergraduate university with health sciences, with an academic health system that took care of people and had this large focus
Sure.
on diversity, equity, inclusion. And so when we think about what's possible coming together, but it then, in some of these questions, we'll touch on that, brings us to how do we make a focus that will be
Yes.
transformative,
Yes.
reach down. You are the national leader in that, and so we're excited to ask you some questions, and we'll jump into that.
I love it. And let me just one broad point that is an umbrella for what you just said. Keep in mind that my campus has programs through the PhD, but the focus for us in this work is that we were producing undergraduates who go on to the best of MD, PhD programs around the country, from Harvard to Stanford. And I say that because at the same time, we have worked with the downtown campus. If you know Baltimore, there's a University of Maryland, Baltimore. My campus is a suburban one, arts and sciences and engineering through the PhD. And then there's the Maryland Medical System, UMMS, and then there's the Hopkins Medical System. And we've worked to build partnerships with both.
Yes.
And the MD PhDs that we produce, the PhDs in biochemistry from our campus and big grants from NIH with the medical school at Maryland, for example. But the undergrad programs, the biggest part that's important, all of these students are doing research at the Maryland Medical and at the Hopkins Medical. Not just in the summers, but during the year. It's that sustained research experience that helps not only with producing MD PhDs, but in making people more competitive for med schools when they've had that research experience and some clinical experiences in both those things. So I bring that up. Okay.
Thank you. Well, it'll take us to our first
Yes.
question.
Go right ahead.
One of the things that you did so well is you helped the students in the program you created
Yes.
believed they could do it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this belief in self
Yes.
is transformative.
Yes.
Can you talk to
Sure.
us about how you instill in a
Yes.
student, you can do this.
Yes,
You
yes.
can do this.
Well, and keep in mind that I fully understood that one needs a certain background, academic background, to have a reasonable chance of succeeding in biochemistry or in biology. You don't start with remediation and expect somebody to do calculus. So you start there. All right. Now, we have K through 12 programs that are working with kids who have skills issues. Will those kids ever become doctors? In many cases, maybe not. This depends on how far down they are in skills. We have to be honest about that. People sometimes can have great attitudes and think, well, he's a nice person, he should be able to become. It doesn't work like that. You all know how hard it is to get into any program, how hard it is to pass board exams for nursing. You know, as an example, it's very important, and a lot of people of color have challenges so in those courses. So this is what I would say. We wanted first to see, can we find students who are the best in their schools and make them even better? So from inner city schools, from rural schools, because the competition would be kids who came from the STEM schools in the Baltimore, Washington corridor, whose parents are scientists at NIH. When your parents are scientists, you've got an advantage. Or when your dad is or mom is a cybersecurity person at NSA, you've got an advantage, right? Most kids of color don't have that, a few. But so we started with that notion of looking at what background can we take and expect that we can build it up to the extent they can make it. We start there. We have to be realistic about that. Secondly, in the summer program, if you've not looked at the 60 Minutes piece on the MyHub program, look at that. It's only 15 minutes, but you must look at that. I got more hate mail because of that. And the reason I got so much hate mail was that we take their phones away from them in that first summer. And I got all this hate mail saying, this is America. You cannot take somebody's phone. I mean, imagine how you would feel if we took your phone away all during the week. But you know who told us to do that? At the end of one summer, we said, how can we help you to become more of a community? And they said, take the phones away during the week. Because high school kids are talking to their moms and to their friends from high school. And you want them to rely on each other, not outside. And it works. It really does. But there's a kind of, we're all addicted to our phones. If anybody in here lost your phone for 3 hours, you'd be depressed. You know, so it was really, it's like boot camp. It really is. So I mean, look at that piece. And what we teach them there, two things that are really important. Building community. We give them really hard problems that they cannot solve to make a point. That, and it comes from my NSF program as a kid at Tuskegee when the guy came in, put a math problem on the board for all of us, high achievers, and nobody could solve it. And he left. He said, when you can solve it, come and see me. And all the kids were really upset. I was younger and not as cynical as a teenager. I was much younger. And I said, well, he really believes in us. And it took us 2 days to solve the problem, but it broke us down. There's a cockiness that kids have. I can do that. I got this, right? That the real point is that true problems in life are not solved like that. And in our country, we're constantly giving problems that they solve like that, right? So it's to get them to keep thinking and to be frustrated. We want them to be frustrated and to think, this is hard. Because you can talk about fun all you want to. When you talk about succeeding in science, you've got to immerse yourself in the work, right? So look at that, and that would do it. And what I would finally say that's important is that but in the meantime, even though they couldn't solve the problems in the first part, we're saying, but we believe in you. Of all the things I can say, we believe in you. Now, and giving them opportunities to think about the options. When I gave a keynote to the biotech programs in our country, funded by NSF, these are biotech programs designed to get people to get AAs. It wasn't 2% people of color in the room. There were 1,000 people. Because people don't know the opportunities. When I chaired the National Academies Committee, yeah, it's about producing more PhDs, but it's also about producing people in health-related areas starting at the AA level. It's a continuum of opportunities. And it doesn't mean you're saying, oh, well, you're going to limit them to that. No, it's getting them into the profession, one of them. Then they can go on and do other things later on if they want. But there should be opportunities across those areas. Almost half of Americans start in community colleges. So we need to think about that continuum. That's what I would say.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So it is really a pleasure being here. I'm so excited. And the pleasure is because, one, it is having an amazing transformational leader like you with us to have this dialogue is just really beyond exciting and inspiring. And I'm telling you, probably I'm going to get in real trouble with my daughter, who has been working for Teach for America now for 3 years, that I did not invite her to be here with us tonight or today, because there is nothing that kind of moves her and the passion that having a transformational leader in education like you being here today. To me, what is exciting is that we are a learning institution that have been working on learning and transformation in healthcare for over a century at the present time. And when we came with Michigan State University, we came together with our partners because of our belief that together we can transform health and improve the health of the communities that we serve. And we believe that we can do it through our ability to learn, research, but as importantly, listen to the community that's around us at the present time. And when we look at health outcomes as well as our health systems, we know that we have challenges. Major part of that challenge is our health inequity and the disparities in outcome that are driven by that health inequity that we are having at the present time. I think Norm talked well about that gender inequity, but currently we definitely have a racial and ethnic inequity when it's related to that. And this is why, as part of that partnership, other than the focus on education and learning and research, but that focus on making sure that we are looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion in every single aspect of the work that we are doing at the present time. And we really believe that this is what's going to transform healthcare. When we look at it today, 80% of healthcare outcomes is determined by social determinants of health. You know, this is the social and economic status of a community drives that. We've seen it during COVID. We've seen it with other specific illnesses, and there is a lot of research on that as it relates to that aspect. Part of healthcare and many of the specialties in healthcare, as you mentioned, are kind of bound or connected to the STEM education system. It is in science, it's in technology, and our ability to improve health equities is really to be able to educate more minority students so that they get engaged into healthcare, in the healthcare industry, because the ability for people to connect with their communities and to make a difference is very important. Would love to have your thoughts. How can we kind of build on that? How can we kind of continue to kind of drive that from K to 12, and then after that into college as well, going into postgraduate programs. Whether we are talking about medical nursing, but all the support services that exist at the present time with respect to healthcare. You have bioengineering, you have social works, you have supply chain, you have management, you have operations. So it is not honestly just related to kind of 2 or 3 job descriptions in healthcare, but a lot of areas that need a much more diverse workforce to kind of be able to bring those disparities that we are seeing kind of closer.
Yeah, let me start by saying, as I listened to Adnan and his accent, we talked from the beginning that he has a background from American University in Beirut. I was fortunate with my girlfriend, now wife, 40-some years ago, to study at the American University in Cairo in Egypt, and it began to broaden our thinking about diversity, people from all over the world. And when you say black, it could be somebody from the islands, African back, whatever. When you say Hispanic, again, same thing. Asian, same thing. So here's what I would say, and there are 2 or 3 things about health inequities. I would challenge the health community to look at the work that the intelligence community does. We partner with the National Security Agency. General Nakasone is a good friend, the head of NSA. And I actually think the intelligence community is more enlightened than universities in terms of diversity. And one of the reasons is that they really do get the point that they need to have as many perspectives as they're working to solve problems that will defend or protect our country. And so one of the things they do in that Baltimore-Washington art corridor that you appreciate is to give high school kids and teachers a chance to work in national agencies. And so we have students who come in who've worked for 2 years since 10th grade at NSA. And they see connections between math and computing and cybersecurity, and they bring those problems. Now, I will give credit to NIH. NIH takes a lot of kids in. When Zerhuni is there, and brings students in, and they get to learn. They have good hands, and all of that, and they get to see. I think there's nothing, and UMB, the campus downtown, has a CURE program, C-U-R-E, for middle school inner city kids, and gives them white coats, and they begin to look at professions and all of that. So the idea of having children in the environment. But I would say, that, I mean, there are long-term possibilities and short-term. In the short term, those undergraduates who have an interest in something in healthcare, the extent to which there is a partnership involving with strong relationships between faculty and staff at the undergrad experience and with Henry Ford and the medical schools and the nursing and those other areas, really important. And what we found that was important was multi-level partnerships and regular substantive connecting through meetings. So with NSA, the head of NSA said to us 15 years ago, we had 500 of our graduates at that time who were, of all races, who were working at NSA. He said, I'd like to double that and increase substantially the number of people of color and women. So the idea of being intentional and proactive. So we now have 1,200 of our graduates working at NSA, back and forth, and a lot who are doing internships, that point of an internship. So the idea of thinking about ways of building the relationship in a substantive way sooner is really important. And I'll just give you one other point. As a math teacher, getting word problems from different professions that can be used to show the relationship, whether it's between algebra at a certain level or calculus or whatever. You know, as I look at my PSA rate, and as it goes up, that number, you know, the rate at which it goes up, that's a great math problem. You know what I'm saying? My doctor said, I can't believe you're talking math at this point. I'm like Einstein, always math, always, never enough math, right? But I'm just saying, there is this need. We do this in economics. We bring in the business of it. You know, there's the need for faculty and groups to look at problems in healthcare and how you can, because people are always asking this question in math, when would I use this? When will I use this? You know, but having, and you all are rich in examples. And so the internships, getting people over, and not just visiting, but getting them involved in substantive work, whether it's a shadowing in clinical or the research or whatever, very important, very important. And then knowing how, let me tell you what one of my scientists, white male, says, Mike Summers says, to a group of parents of high-achieving Black and Latino kids. He gives them all the statistics about whether it's about high blood pressure, about diabetes, about sickle cell, all these. And he says, if we don't have doctors focusing on these things, or scientists, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? That we need someone, you know, to getting families to understand we need you in this work. That's the thing I would say.
Any of advice when you talk about that student selection and exposure?
Yes.
How early do you think we should start with that?
You know, that's a great question.
Early on,
Great question. And you can have a variety of levels. When I did work with the Obama chair, that Obama Commission on Education, there is work to be done starting in pre-K. There's no doubt about that. Yes. Pre-K, because so many children don't have the basic vocabulary and the support they need. And we have those kinds of programs. And and in the report that we did from 2011, trying to produce PhDs in the life sciences and other areas, we said we do need this work in pre-K through 12. And there are a lot of issues, such as the need for teachers to have stronger backgrounds in middle school and elementary school in STEM. Most teachers around the country, pre-K, pre-12, from middle school, if they're teaching in the elementary level through the 8th grade, they've had very little math and science. Because the courses we offer in all of our teach ed programs are for math for elementary school teachers. Well, that's less than algebra. So the ones who are the best teachers just happen to do well in math in high school themselves. They may have had calculus in high school, but that's one of the, when I look at international comparisons, and the reason we're in the bottom half on the TIMS, on the International Math, is that our teachers are wonderful people. They haven't been given enough math background. They just have not. So we have a Sherman Scholars Program that you can look at. That's like the Mauhoff, but it's for producing really good math and science teachers who will work in challenging schools and who have a major in math or science, because then not only are they able to handle the problems, they can help other teachers learn the problems. The biggest nightmare for a fifth grade teacher is that the kids' parents have a background in STEM, in engineering or something. Because, see, you will explain or work the problem one way, and that teacher said, no, that's wrong, because that only knows one way to solve it. It takes, so to teach algebra, which they do in the 8th grade, 7th grade, you need to have had at least a year of calculus. To teach something at one level, you need much more to put it in perspective, and it's not happening. So at that level, those are the kinds of issues, all right, the teachers. But I would say for you, short term, in the next 5 years, I'm looking at the undergrad experience, looking at students. I mean, and this is where analytics will be important that I talk about in the book, asking the question, who are the students of color, first generation college, who are interested in the healthcare professions? Who are the ones who've gotten at least a B? At least a B in the first year of STEM. A B. Because I'll tell you something. If a student gets a C in the first year of chemistry, the probability of that student going on to get a degree in chemistry is less than 0.2. Because one thing builds on another. I'm studying French every day. You don't, but everybody would know. And I told somebody earlier, when I started 4 years ago, my student said, don't you think you're kind of old? And that was all I needed. That was all I needed as this seniors. I said, oh, you bring it on. Oh, yeah, so je parle français avec mes étudiants tous les jours. Tous les jours. And many of my students speak French, so they're always correcting mon prononciation. All right, but here's the point. You can't talk about speaking fluently if you don't have fundamentals. Everything depends on the foundation, conjugation, the conjugation, the verbs, right? But you build on that in chemistry, math, physics, all of the same way. You have to have that fundamental, and if your fundamentals are weak, then you start off. You don't build a house on a weak foundation. So we have this notion, you've got to get at least a B. So we actually have students retaking courses. Some of my best students had to retake in the first years, blacks, of chemistry. And they cried about retaking the courses, but they did, and now they're PhDs and MD PhDs. And then the other thing, if you get a chance to look at our Chemistry Discovery Center at UMBC, the CDC, we say it's not for disease, Chemistry Discovery Center. And it's on collaborative learning and putting people into groups. And for the diversity piece, not letting people be with their friends. Get them to be with people from all over, right? Randomly selecting people and teaching them that. And then finally, what I would say is that bringing some of those who've gotten the Bs into a group where they can learn about the possibilities. They need to know the possibilities, the two medical schools, the other health professions, what it will take, right? And using your examples of success, women, blacks, Latinos, whoever. And I mean, you can't bring them back all the time. So one of the things that really is helpful, doing videos of some of the successful people talking about their stories. Stories matter. Stories matter. And people think that somebody who's a successful DO or MD was always super whatever. And when you hear their story, you hear where they had to overcome something. Young people need to know it wasn't always the best situation. But you get some videos that you can use and have up showing the stories of success. Duke does it with black men in white coats. Yeah, that's great. Right? And the guy who wrote that book is a Mauhoff. It's one of my kids. Right? Damon Tweedy, yeah. First in his family go to college, and I called him a failure because he wouldn't go for that PhD. He got his MD from Duke and then went and got a JD from Yale. And I said, anybody can go to law school. He was not happy with me. Wait a minute. I do that not because I don't respect lawyers, but I'm trying to get more to go this way of the science, right? And so he's a professor there in psychiatry there at Duke. But the focus on, in that series, if you look at those videos they have. So, I mean, MSU should have videos of DOs and MDs and others of people of color and telling their stories. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. So the nerd party, right? My work in stroke, the challenge we faced was overcoming the anisotropy in the brain.
Wow.
So understanding how to look at eigenvectors
Yes,
was
yes.
really
I love
important in being able, I thought,
It gives me goosebumps with that eigenvector. It really.
I thought, right?
Oh, you're after my own heart. You really.
But
My son had a stroke recently. I'm going to go back and learn about the eigenvectors. I really am. Yeah.
I'm your guy. And so, but I had a professor here in my philosophy class who said half of what you learn has to be outside of what you do.
Yes.
And when I think about my ability to have an impact on stroke, it was building trust with my patients. It was being able to come together as a team. It was understanding what were the barriers to access implicit bias. The point is that Snow talked about, right, these two different cultures and how there's a divide. But what you did and talked about is the most impactful will be STEM students, but they have to have that other piece.
That's exactly right. It's not everybody who can quote C.P. Snow. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. Very nice.
That was my Dr. Pochin. Shout out to my philosophy teacher.
That's wonderful.
And what I would say is that as we think about pathways and training our students, that preparation, because often there's too much of a focus on this is the only way to get there. And we're creating 50 new pathways into careers in health.
Excellent.
You know, nursing. But how did you do it?
So
how did you do it? You brought it together.
I love it. And it's, you know, I use a statement, the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or. Now, it's not mine. I love it, though. It is from Jim Collins in Good to Great. It's not one thing or the other. It's the combining. And so we are always with the Mile House teaching them that we don't want you just to be techies. So they have a really solid grounding in the humanities and social sciences. So much so that first summer in the Mile House program, in the Bridge program, there is a course in the humanities that focuses on culture and attitudes about science and about African Americans and everything from the Tuskegee experiment to the challenges at Hopkins with Henrietta Lacks. I mean, just not to make people bitter, but just to say these are the challenges we have faced that we have to overcome. Now, just two quick examples. The chair of neurosurgery at Vanderbilt is one of my students, one of my white students, who had a major in interdisciplinary studies. He did the humanities and biochemistry together. And he said, and he went to Hopkins, and now he's chair of he's pediatric neurosurgery at Vanderbilt. But he says this, Reed says that it wasn't the biochemistry that helped him with the parents of his patients. He said, but when he had to give bad news to parents of a child about brain damage, it was the humility he developed from studying the humanities that gave him the sensitivity to develop the language and approach to do it. So we have him constantly talking to him and a video of him talking about that to students, all right? Then the other one, the name you're gonna see across my forehead is Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett. She's the first black woman in the world to create a vaccine. She led the team that created the Moderna vaccine. Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, she was on the cover of Time magazine with 3 others. She's young, mid-30s. She's not on the Harvard faculty, but Bunny Graham, and there's a message here though. And Marita, you'll appreciate this when you think about helping people with the idea of mentoring. Her mentor, Bunny Graham, and Fauci, his boss at NIH, saw her potential, gave her the opportunity to lead the research team well before, and it was that opportunity and mentoring that allowed her to move ahead and create this vaccine that is being talked about so much now from Moderna. And here's the point. When Moderna was moving ahead to do the sampling, they was about finished, and she realized that there were very few people of color who were in the pilot. And she said, we cannot start till we get more black people here. Now, she learned that because she did a double major in the life sciences, biology, and in the social sciences. And she said it was her experiences working with patients, HIV patients out in Baltimore, and seeing how people view doctors and the science that showed the socioeconomic, cultural issues that made her so convinced that they couldn't move ahead with the vaccine until they had so many. So she called me and said, I want you to be in this pilot. And I want you to go on TV talking about it, and if you can get your wife to do it. So we did. But it was her teaching us how important it was to begin to change attitudes about that, and that's the point I was making.
Yeah, there's an aphorism I like called "They won't care how much you know until they know how much you care."
That's exactly
And I think
right.
that's
Yeah.
It's the story about the Moderna vaccine is really very enlightening, and for many of you who may not know is that the biggest accrual or largest accrual for diversity patient was at Henry Ford in Detroit.
Oh.
To kind of, because this is where we really had the opportunity, to your point, to kind of show we were looking to see what are the side effects,
Yes.
what is the safety of the drug, what's the efficiency of the drug.
Yeah.
And because of the population, because of the trust, talking again about inequities, this is
Sure.
what have made the difference.
Sure. But you know, I want you to, when she walks into a room and people say she helped create a vaccine, you can see the faces of children or women and blacks looking. And it is so powerful because you can feel people saying, maybe I could do that too. And when I say her name, Kismika Corbett, people say, well, what country is she from? I said, she's not from another country. She's from the country, as we say in the South. She's from a little country town in North Carolina. And I love that. I love that. She's from Hillsborough, North Carolina. I recruited her when she was 17. And it's so good for people to see that she can come from a rural area and come through, right? And now be a fashionable woman who's also a scientist at Harvard. It's a nice story.
It's a great story, and you talk about the potential of people, but also you focus a lot in your work on hard work, setting expectations, teamwork. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey yourself through this, and how can you develop this as part of your leadership?
Sure. Very quickly, and I love the fact that they're project managing over here. So no, let me just say that. No, I was very blessed to be a part of the civil rights movement, which I'll talk about tonight, and to connect civil rights and mathematics. Because when I first heard Dr. King, I was solving a little algebra problem. So I've always thought that way, like the famous Bob Moses, who was a mentor of mine, that this right to algebra is a civil right, that we all need that background. Whether you're going into the social sciences or whatever, because statistics, data science, everything, you got to have that critical thinking that you get from just basic algebra. And that made a difference to me in my marching and all of that. The idea that we could teach young people to feel empowered, they can do even more. So this Meyerhoff and UMBC are both based on the notion that we can be better than we are, but that we need to be analytical in saying, okay, what's not working well right now? We can produce many more blacks, Latinos, first-generation college people in all these professions, but it has to be rigorous work. It has, and for me, what we say at UMBC is that we are the house of grit. Our Chesapeake Bay Retriever is named True Grit. You know, and I'm going to say this, and you're going to appreciate this. In this country, when we think about public universities, we think about sports. I'm a graduate of Illinois for my PhD. With all the Nobel laureates, everybody thinks Big Ten. All right, MSU, University of Michigan, good schools, great sports. This is the way but if you think about Carnegie Mellon, Hopkins, you think brain power. And so I'm challenging us in terms of culture. You know, Eric Weiner, I say in this book, culture is the sea we swim in, he says, so all-consuming that we fail to recognize until we step out of it. And I'm saying this, while I respect sports, the fact is that the country tends to think the big public's all about sports and then academics. And I'm saying if we want kids to want to be something more than a football player or basketball, we've got to have them understanding becoming a nurse or a doctor, that's like being a hero. That's the big stuff. And I'm saying we have to be ambassadors. These are the people we should be most impressed by. And that's a large cultural issue, but I do think we have this responsibility at a time when everybody's saying, well, does somebody really need a college degree? Where would we all be if we didn't have health professionals during COVID? We need to be saying we'd be dead if it were not for what MSU did. You see what I'm saying? We've got to say that far more passionately to get the public and elected officials understanding that this education matters, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. That's
So I'm gonna be back on my job instead of being an audience member. So I'm going to just give a time marker for those of you in our physical audience, also those of you joining us online. We're gonna take one more question from Norm, and then we would like for you all to engage with us. So you can start thinking about the questions you'd like to ask. Dr. Walker is going to help me to navigate the questions that are online. I think Dr. Walker or Ms. Shepard has a microphone for you all in the audience. And so after we have this next question, we're going to open it up to you all, okay?
Marvelous, thank you. And it's a team. So God bless. So one of the things that I like that you did, speaking about sports, is you flipped it.
Yeah.
When 16th beat number 1 Virginia in 2018, you brought your team together to say, now they're going to ask us about us.
Oh, yeah.
And then you put together all the
Take your
academic,
homework, boy.
nerdy, crushing it. Right?
We got some great nerds up here. I'll tell you, I love it.
Yes.
We're all mega nerds. I love it. Renita, would you give me some more coffee? Can I get somebody to give me some more coffee or something? Would you please? Thank you for my throat. Thank you. But no, I love, and it's so funny because we take pride in being a big nerdy school. We are very respectful of the large school there. It's like your University of Michigan College Park, and they do excellent work. They really do. And we wanted to make sure we were not being seen as trying to be like them. We want to be who we are, all right? And we are respectable sports, not a big powerhouse in sports, all right? So when we did beat number 1, and my students are so nerdy, they said, what? And everybody was making such a big deal. My students were saying, what's the big deal, Doc? I mean, it's just basketball. That's my kids, right? And I said, wait a minute, with the number 16, they said, what does the number 16 mean? They didn't even know what it meant. I said, it meant we were the worst in the tournament and we beat the best. They went, oh, okay. I get that, statistics. And everybody said we wouldn't do it. And we didn't just barely beat, we beat by 20 points. Right? And so as I said to our lovely folks at UVA, which has more money in their endowment than Hopkins, they're just that wealthy, $9-10 billion. When they won the National the next year, I said, we made you better, right? Because they had taken us for granted, and we have respect for it. But we did use that as a piece that I wrote from the Atlantic, in the Atlantic that weekend that said, what I was most proud of was what the students said afterwards. We asked, the reporter said, what are you going to do now? And one kid said, I've got to go back to my room and study for a test. I love that. But the answer that brought tears to everybody was the next one. With tears coming down his face, he said, we, the basketball team, we stand on the shoulders of our chess team. Is that powerful? Because we do so well in chess. Where in America would basketball players be respected? Now that's UMBC. And that's what we want. And when people said, now you got to get to be big sports, because look at what it, and the campus said, no, that's not who we are. We respect that, but that's not who we are. We are mid-sized. You know, we don't have football. We're Division I, and our basketball players are really good students. You know, that's a message that upsets some people, but no, I always say, can your basketball team read? And I say that seriously. Depends on where you are. Okay, and we need to be honest about that. But you're right. We took that opportunity to reinforce the idea. We take great pride in being a place where the brain power is the top, and that's not what you hear on public university campuses. Everybody reveres the football player, the basketball player, and that's fine. But what about the kid who does really well in physics or philosophy? That's the idea.
I love it. And, Tom Izzo would call me if I didn't mention that in 2014 and 2015, we beat Virginia. But it was not the upset of the century.
That's so funny. And I promise my team outside every where I go, and believe me, I don't care where I am from Harvard to say, they will bring up that game.
And what I want to say as well about Tom Izzo is that, the way that we try to do it is student athletes, and the graduation rate is north of 90%. And it's flipping it, and it's having what is inherent to sports help build team and spirit and resilience and grit. But it's got to be done the right way.
Yes.
And
I will say something that's very controversial. My athletes, though, it's really hard to be in a Division I sport and plan to become a physician.
Very hard.
That's just real. It really is. If you want a kid to flunk out, And one of the reasons I can say this is that in STEM disciplines, you really have to marry it. You've got to be there every day. You can't just get the notes. You know what I mean? In the social sciences, if you can read and write well, you perhaps can get a B. All right, if you're not there, get the notes and you really study hard. But the sciences are so terribly demanding in the nature of the work that our students who go into health professions tend to be students who are from other countries because there's a level of hunger there. And that's something I need to say in general, that, I mean, why is New York so fabulous throughout the 20th century? Because everybody had parents from other countries, heavily European in the 20th century. All the doctors and everybody else. That's just true. When I gave the commencement address in 2002 at Brooklyn College, all of these people who had come back for their 50th were top in medicine, in amazingly, in entertainment, in Wall Street. None of them had money. Their parents did not go to college, but there was that hunger. You know, of all the things I could say about Mauerhof, about UMBC, about in general, when you find the hunger, anything's possible. You can take a returning mother who may have a few academic challenges, but if there's that hunger there because she's doing it for her kids, oh yeah, it can happen. And that's one of the things I would say is, shouldn't just be the 18-year-olds. What about those people who are adults, who are working, who are trying to take care of their families? How do we give them the support? Because they've got the hunger, because they're doing it for their kids. And they can get into some of these health professions. That's another way we should be thinking about it.
That's really great. Thank you. I want to open this up for questions. And, you know, as that's happening, mentioning one of the things that did happen with COVID is it helped a more broad view of the transformative leaders in health. And nursing, for example, was just so far out front. And we're blessed that we have an amazing nursing dean.
I had that feeling, some of that vibe, some of
You
I was
feel
feeling that vibe. And I have to tell you, I am really an honorary nurse because when I was at Coppin State at the Inner City College as a young dean for arts and sciences, we were having real problems with the exam, with the board exam. And so I went back, just as I talk about French, and to learn the nursing curriculum. I literally did, as a dean of arts and sciences and provost, learn and to look at them in the writing of the questions, and then the board exam, and the respect you get when you look at those threads, and just fast, and why so many people don't do well. And so every year I look at pass rates of institutions. And in my own state, I saw and I'd heard how scores had gone down because of COVID, because you either know it or you don't, quite frank, right? All those, and the challenges that people face. So I have great respect. But I've got that feeling there was some nursing in it.
That's because Jane Kirschland has taught you very well, just like she taught me.
I love it. I love it. I absolutely love it. I love it. That's wonderful.
Dr. Wisdom.
Good morning, Kimberly Dawn Wisdom,
Yes.
Henry Ford Health System, or Henry Ford Health now. It's hard to say after decades of saying system, so.
So what was the rationale, by the way? Because everybody, when I said to somebody I was going to be with the Henry Ford Health System, they said, no, it's Henry Ford Health now.
That's
What
right.
was the rationale?
So the rationale is that in the past, people kind of were thinking about system.
Yeah.
It makes sense to the community that you are bringing things together. But
Yeah.
people are looking at healthcare totally differently.
Okay.
And we are looking at ourselves not only a building or a ambulatory clinic or a
Yes.
hospital,
Yes.
but more is as a team as well as a community trying to improve the health of our community.
Okay.
So taking the system out
Yeah.
and kind of make it more a commitment to the community as well as a marriage with the community to kind of improve health. This is what kind of drove
Okay.
that removing the system. The system sounded too industrial
I got it.
versus kind of connecting with the community and seeing how we are transforming health.
And the reason I ask is that when I leave places, when I'm impressed, I like to be intelligent in being an ambassador. So now I have the answer I can use. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Wisdom.
I made that mistake intentionally just so we would have more. So anyway, just very delighted to hear from you and just this provocative conversation.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate how you talked about the intentionality and
Yes.
being proactive.
Yes.
And I just want to say at Henry Ford Health, we've worked for years with the K through 12 students in a very deliberate way. We work with them for years and years. And Dr. Martina Caldwell, who's part of the committee, she's not here today, is working on that pipeline, pathway, that sort of thing. So here we work with all these youth in the inner city. How can we be very strategic, calculating, thoughtful in terms of identifying students early,
Yeah.
mentoring them, sponsoring them, so that we can
Yes.
almost guarantee
Yes.
that we'll have a pipeline or
Yes.
a pathway
Excellent
of
question.
success. I see this as a math equation, and I want to know if you can solve
I
it.
know, I love it. I appreciate that knowing there is. I mean, this is where analytics will be really important. We work with the national agencies on something I had challenged them to think about. People will give out money. It takes money. Let me just start there. It clearly takes money to do anything. And well, if you just start, if undergrad level or in the high school level, the idea of, first of all, people who are mentoring students regularly with full-time staff who are running a program, all right? But here's the deal. So the idea of having scholars, undergrad scholars, okay, we have that. We have from different national agencies. I'll give you just one example. Nora Vokow, who's the head of the National Institute for Drug and Alcohol Abuse. When I first walked around with her, the scientist there at NIH, and she said, now this is all on drugs and alcohol. And there were no black scientists because it's under 2% black or Hispanic, very few. She said, do you think blacks and Hispanics have problems with alcohol and drugs, right? But where are the people who bring that perspective? So she's trying to produce, right? So we have scholarship money to produce more students who are doing well in STEM, who become exposed to opportunities. Most people don't realize there are opportunities to become a scientist involved in alcohol abuse or drug abuse, right? These areas. And the point is that if it's for the health professions in general, but I would challenge you to think about Henry Ford Health and health scholars, undergrad scholars, and create a community of those. And you can start even small with 10 people with the idea that they're gonna be in one of the health professions, right? And thinking about different opportunities at different levels, right? Some of whom may be in public health or health science, who may be on the administrative side, some on the STEM side, but to use analytics to look carefully at the investment you make, starting with, say, sophomores, freshmen, or whatever, all the way through. This is what I'm doing with some of the national agencies now. NSA wants them to come and work there for some number of years, right? And we have that kind of effort. And so I would argue that you need that kind of structured program so that you can look every year at how those students are doing. What else do they need? How they're getting to know mentors who are there. Everybody is not a good mentor just because you have an advanced degree. That's true for people that becoming tenure now. You've got to find those who know how to be a mentor. And the other word I want to use is champion. We need mentors who can give advice, and they're there when people need it. But champions will knock down a door for a person. We need champions who can, and I've seen that. I'm working. We have one of the only blacks. She was the first black woman there in public health, in immunology at Columbia Public Health, School of Public Health. And it's a great story that she was writing these grants for NIH and getting great response, great evaluations, but it wasn't what it needed to get funded. You can be excellent and still not get funded. You got to have that outstanding or whatever. And it took somebody knocking down a door to get her to that point. Because without that funding, you don't get tenure, right? Now, she had PhD biochemistry from Harvard and a postdoc at Penn, and then was at Columbia and was still challenged. Because it takes people working and giving support. Brilliance is not enough. It really does take more than that. So I'm saying to have a group of allies, because you're not going to find enough people of color, but and women. When I was at Illinois in the grad program, that first program in abstract algebra, there were no women tenured faculty at all in math at Illinois. There were 100 faculty, one woman, and she was a non-tenure track PhD. So she had a way of looking at me, a white woman, of saying, I know what you're going through. She was by herself, right? I tell you that because you will find women often who are more accustomed to helping with diversity. It's good to see white men and men of other races there because that's where the power is. And so to have people, so in my book before this one called Holding Fast to Dreams, there's a picture of a white male and two students. One is Korean American, one is black male, and they're looking at HIV. And somebody said, why wouldn't you put a woman or a black on the cover? I said, because the power in science and healthcare is primarily in the hands of white men and a few others, all right? And that's not a disparaging comment. I'm not talking as an angry black man. I'm talking as a mathematician. That's just the stat. That's the truth, right? And I wanted people to see this guy because he is one of the leading producers of blacks who go on to get MD, PhDs, and PhDs in biochemistry, and a member of the National Academy of Sciences. So if you look at my book before this one, you'll see HIV, the three-dimensional structure, and you'll see this white man on the cover. And that's, so that I'm saying intentionality. He knows where every one of his students is, and is calling and asking and working with national agencies. And we'll ask this question, well, how many other blacks have you had to even put in a grant, a proposal? We don't know. How do you not know? You need to know how many women, how many, you disaggregating the data, right? You say you want more, you've got to be intentional. That's the point. I love her. She's trying to tell me.
Then we have a question online.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
I'm actually glad that you asked the question that you asked, because Dr. Martina Caldwell is the next question that we have. And her question is, can you talk about strategies for retaining structurally marginalized students in undergrad and graduate health sciences?
Yes, yes.
A recent 2022 study showed that students who identify as Black and Hispanic Latin, low-income and under-resourced neighborhoods left medical school at twice the rate of their peers. Students with all three leave medical school at nearly 4 times the rate, and attrition of these groups at the undergrad level is much higher. Yep. It feels particularly harmful when individuals make it to a level of academic achievement, but they do not have the support or are harmed to such a degree that they do not make it through their programs.
It's great. The person talking is obviously somebody very knowledgeable about the issues. In order to ask the good question, you've got to know what you're talking about. So I would say several things. Number one, we have something we call retriever courage. Remember, our dog, True Grit, is Chesapeake Bay Retriever, and that's the courage to hear what we may not want to hear. And I say that because first strategy is to get a chance to listen to the voices of those who are different. And that means those who are different, underrepresented, under-resourced, who are doing well, and those who are not doing well. Because the question would be, the ineluctable question really is, well, why are they leaving? What can they tell us? What can we learn from them? I learned from a community college in Chicago years ago that it was helpful to the faculty to bring back people who had flunked out and have them talk to the faculty. We always bring back the success stories, and we need those. But what about the people who left for whatever reasons? How do we use analytics to say, okay, here are the 10 people who've left. Can we get them back, virtually or in person, to talk about, tell us about your experience. Where did things go wrong? Give us some sense of the challenges. Now, one of the challenges, and I've seen this as I've worked with a number of medical schools and others around the country, one of the challenges is making sure we are convinced the student has enough background to succeed in the first year, for example, of med school. And it's not just grades, depends on the institution. A in one place is not A in another place, not just test scores. There are a lot of factors, and it's not precise. I've seen people who may not have as solid a background, but they've got that will, that grit to say, I will not give up. And they keep going. So it's getting to know the students well enough to see, and it's not because you're going to say, well, they don't have it, so put them out. No, it's that we need to know what the need is, what that gap is. What is it coming from? Is it from preparation in chemistry? Is it from not having been accustomed to working as hard? Is it from not working with other people? Is it from not having the attitude that says, I need more help? What are the factors? What are the questions we should be asking? And you only get that if you listen to both those who've succeeded and those who've not succeeded. and listen carefully for the messages we may not want to hear. Is it that we felt overwhelmed by the environment? Is it the way professors looked at me? In that book, The White Man, Black Man in White Coat, now here was Damon, who was the first basketball player I'd ever seen get a 4.0 in biology. Graduating, went on to do brilliant, first generation college. Now, he was not a good basketball player, but he was on the team. He's going to kill me for saying that. He's going to hear this. I love you, Damon. I love you, but you were not a good basketball player. All right, but you're brilliant. All right, he's going to laugh. But he, he stayed around, but he had to put the focus on the work. But here's my point. He talked about, if you read that book, in that first period, the professor thinking he was the janitor. And he's first-year med student. Well, that has an impact. I will tell you, when I would drive to the National Academies, and I tended to not use a chauffeur. I like to drive myself, and it's a black car. Every time I went there, they asked me who I was driving for. Every time. Now, if I was white, they would not be asking if I was the chauffeur, okay? I finally told them that was my experience, and they put up some pictures of some blacks on the walls. We weren't members of the academy, but they put up pictures up. And the nice thing is I did go into the National Academy. In this coming April, I'm going to the National Academy of Sciences, so it's a real honor. It really is. But the point is, if a young person, not so young, is in an environment and feels unwanted, not because of what somebody said, but just the way they look at you, it can be debilitating. And they need that posse, that cabinet, those people who can say, don't you let other people define who you are. That's the message we send in Meyerhoff. When you go to Stanford or Harvard, I'll never forget, and you don't let anyone else define who you are. And they'd finish a test, and some of their friends in biochemistry or whatever would be really bothered by the test. This is in grad school. And they would say, let's go over to Blooming's, because there's a Bloomingdale's right there. They'd go shopping for therapy, all right? Well, my little middle-class kids didn't have a dime to use to go shopping at Blooming's, and I would have to say, don't you let anybody else define who you are because you don't have money. No, you got brain, right? So I'm saying you've got to listen and understand, how is the culture? Are people stepping out to say, what is this like for a woman in this area? What is this like for a black? And what has been the person's experience? And then what we work to teach our students is, we want to tell the truth to people about what we experience, but we also have to learn how to suck it up. Now, that's a hard thing to say. I was in Massachusetts 60 years ago in high school in the summer because my parents wanted me to see what it would be like to be in class with white kids. And the education was amazing. It was so hard, but I was learning so much, and I was much younger than the other kids, but nobody would speak to me. Literally, none of the white kids. I was the only little black kid. The teachers would not speak to me. They would smile. I would raise my hand when nobody else was about a question. They would just look right through me. And I was feeling really bad. And I called home to my parents, and I said, they don't like me here. And my mother said, how many black kids do you have in your class? None. How many black kids do you think from Birmingham are now studying in Massachusetts? I said, I don't know any. She says, well, you know I love you. I said, yes. She said, son, suck it up. I was so shocked. She said, I was 13. She says, I love you so much, suck it up. She says, I did not send you there to be liked. We sent you there to learn, and the world is not fair, okay? Now, she did call up to the school to let them know how she felt about it. And she told me later, she got off the phone and she cried because they were treating me that way, but she had to toughen me up. So it's both things. It's the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or. It's not that we don't want to deal with it when there's discrimination, but we don't want that implicit, that when people do things that they don't even realize are hurtful, to just knock them down so they don't get back up. So we have to give them that strength. I tell young women of all races, when you go to med school, speak up, project. You've got a softer voice. If you don't, people will walk all over you. Right? Because we think of the doctors, the guys, as being tougher. Somehow, you've got to toughen up, and don't you dare let them see you cry. Suck it up, And they always said, "Doc, yeah," because it's emotional. It is, and so it's both things. I'm not blaming the victim, but I'm saying I want to protect people when they go through it, while they tell the truth. This environment is not welcoming, but at the same time, we don't want them to leave because they feel so bad. It's a difficult message to get out there. Yeah.
same office,
Yep.
Henry Ford Health.
Yep.
I'm the director of the Cancer Service Line, and privileged to be part of this partnership. First of all, thank you so much to you and the panel for this very inspiring program.
Thank you.
You were talking about PSAs, and
Yeah.
I have nothing more enjoyable than when I walk into a room and I find out the patient's an engineer or a physicist, and we're off to the races.
The rate of growth or the ways of that.
It's great. I also want to recognize from my own department, Dr. Eleanor Walker, who's just been doing phenomenal work related to clinical trial accrual for cancer, particularly for underserved populations. She and her team, first of all, they've received over $1 million in external funding, and she just got selected to present at our international meeting on this topic. So we're very, very proud of her, and really great work. And in terms of our partnership, you know, we've been able to give out, through the support of our leadership, over $1 million in grants for cancer, combined cancer research between MSU and Henry Ford Health researchers working together. One of the things that we really worked hard on is to make it very intentional that we were going to prioritize projects that focused on cancer disparities, DIJ, and so on and so forth. And that worked well. We ended up with about 40% of all the projects were specifically related to that.
Excellent.
We're hoping this next year is even going to be higher. How do you further nurture that intentionality? You know, I think that's really something that I try to think about, but you know, it's not easy, and I'm just curious your thoughts about that.
Excellent question. So I start again with Aaron and HHMI and Leslie, the people at HMI. These Hrabowski scholars will not be completely of color. We wanted some of all races, but who are committed to diversity, that their teams are going to be diverse. And they get $1 million a year, as I said. But it's going to be that group, and their first group will be selected in May. You mentioned the cancer. The head of residence for radiation oncology at MD Anderson is one of my Mauhoffs. Her name is Dr. Chelsea Stallings-Penix. Yeah, now Chelsea was one of my kids from age 17 and worked in Dr. Summers' lab, the guy on the book, in AIDS research as an undergraduate, you see. And had that, and then went to the University of Pennsylvania, got MD, PhD, Hopkins resident, and now she's at MD Anderson. And, really important to say, and is married with 3 kids. That's the other thing you have to tell women, that you can have a family and do this kind of work. It's very, to show those examples. It's really great, all right? And
we just got to work together on the Astro board, board of directors, and I will tell you an interesting story.
Yeah.
She was not nominated to be on the Astro board.
Interesting.
And people told her, "You are so talented.
Yeah.
We should just write in your name on the ballot."
Yeah.
So she agreed to do that, and she won the election.
Is that right?
As a write-in candidate.
Is that right?
She's now on the Astro board.
She's fabulous. I'm so proud of her.
She's amazing.
I am so proud of her. Make sure I get a picture so I can send it to her. I text with her all the time. Yeah. I like these. I mean, we need, bad news travels fast, folks. If it's bad news, everybody talks about it. Good news, you got to work on it. You know, there's a good news over. I want to use that, right? And the final one, just in terms of people being in these situations, Kafri Zarasa was in the MD PhD program at Duke, came up and he said, you know, I'm going to drop this MD because I had so much memorization and I just want to go on and do the research. And we sat on my steps and I said, you know, you're so good. Why not do them both? Because you'll be, the PhD is so important. I'm glad you want to do that, but you get a chance to really work with people in a different way, and he did. He went on and got that MD PhD in neurobiology and got the Neuroscience Award for young investigators, tenured now, has a pacemaker for the brain to address schizophrenia, just went into the National Academy of Medicine, has the HHMI investigator, and you'll appreciate this. Duke, he has in his contract that once a month he spends a day up at UMBC mentoring students. That's it. He gets paid to go up and work, and so it's the idea of being intentional about the mentoring, but of all the things I've said, all these, I call them kids and they're now in their 40s, but the fact is they all worked as undergraduates in labs. That's where I'm going with this. Working in labs in undergrad and getting a chance to shadow and see patients can make such a difference. And to know that there are people in their profession who are decent human beings. That's what I mean when I say everybody's not a good mentor. Because, we have, I know we mathematicians can be a little focused on the math problem, not on the person, right? That's true in medicine too, right? But we've got to have people who can show you can be a good human being, a decent, right, polite person, and still be really good at what you do. It's very important. I would say if you looked at the NIH FIRST program, that's a new program to bring in faculty, the FIRST program, of color. And we have a partnership with the medical school downtown I think there are like 12 faculty positions. Half will be on our campus, half will be there. Those are great grants from NIH to produce, because the holy grail, let me just say this, is to have many more people of color who become a part of the professoriate. And not just clinical. I'm going to say it. Not just clinical. We want the clinical, but we need the tenured folks too. We need both. All right, to solve a problem as a mathematician, I would say you have to state it. You have to state it. Very important. Okay, and that's the idea.
And our students are looking for that.
Yeah, they need to see that. The dean, Sandy Williams, who was the dean at Duke, had me down years ago, and he said, "We've got some good Mauhoffs coming from your campus, blacks." He says, "But we're still only a couple of percent. We have very few tenured black faculty members. What do we need to do?" And that's what we talked about intention. I said, if you see some people doing well in med school, then we need to start working with them now to tell them you can be the professor. They've got to see it. They've got to see it. I tell the story. I saw that first mathematician, black PhD, when I was at Tuskegee that summer. And he put the problem on the board and he left. And I said, "What's his name?" And they said, "Dr. So-and-so." And they said, "Well," I said, "He's not a physician." They said, "But he's got a PhD." And they told me what a PhD was. I said, "That's what I want." I was scared of blood, so I knew I wasn't going to do that. And I love math so much. But I said, that's what I'm going to do. So every day, I tell students this from age 13, I'd look in the mirror and say in the morning, "Good morning, Dr. Hrabowski." Every day until I got it at 23, 24. Yeah, you have to see it. And then do the work to back up the seeing, right? But you got to see it. I tell my scholars, I call them doctor from the freshman year. I just want them to hear it.
That's nice.
To feel it. You hear what I'm saying? It makes a difference, yeah.
Dr. Walker has our last question.
Yeah.
Yes, this is actually stemming from the conversation in the beginning when you were talking about public education. So the question is, how was public education funded prior to 1970?
Oh, public education. Oh, yeah, education has been public for everyone for years, but I will say, going back to the Carnegie report, it's only been in the early 20th century that we believed high school education was important for everybody. For blacks, the Rosenwald schools, my parents actually went to Rosenwald schools in rural Alabama because there were no public schools in the first part. And then they started getting training schools, but they did not go to school as long as the white kids, because they had to go out and pick the cotton. That's Alabama. That's just taught, So no, until it was only in the mid-20th century that we moved to saying everybody needed to have a high school diploma. All right, and I will tell you, and even when it was public, it still was not equal. It was not equal. We were getting the hand-me-down books from white schools as a child. That's what I got. That's why I wanted to march, because they would put brown paper bags around these old books. And you couldn't bring a new book in because you'd be different from somebody. So it's been that lack of equality a long time. And when people say, when I'm in the South especially, when people say, we shouldn't talk about those things because that'll make people bitter. No, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. It's not to make people bitter. It's to say, but we can be better than that. We can be better than that. That's the idea.
So, Dr. Hrabowski,
Yes.
I'm going to take this privilege, first of all, to just say thank you. Thank you. This is, of course, Black History Month. We are celebrating Black histories, Black herstories, and Black futures. And, You've been so impactful this morning. This has been amazing. I do want to speak the names of yourself, but also others who have been champions or who have opened the doors for me. I'm so thankful to meet someone who made it possible for me in the person of Dr. Barbara Rossley, who is an alum of the College of Osteopathic Medicine. And so I thank her in these spaces every time I get the opportunity, because she was the first Black woman to be a dean of any U.S. medical school. So she makes it possible for me to be here.
That's nice.
Someone else who's sitting in this room is Dr. Wanda Lipscomb, who has been a champion and a mentor and continues to do that in this work. And so I take this moment to thank all of you. I want to thank you because as a little girl from New Orleans, from the South, getting to know who you were at the end of high school. I went to Auburn University, you know that. Coming here and entering a very rigorous kinesiology program in the College of Education, which is ranked globally, but there were only ever 2 of us. And so being connected to your legacy said, number 1, interdisciplinary study was important. Number 2, I could do it. And number 3, that it didn't have to be separate from inclusive excellence.
Yes, very good.
So in this moment, I just want to thank all of you who have made it possible for me to sit here on this day. I want to thank you for being with us on behalf of the College of Osteopathic Medicine, Michigan State University, and Henry Ford Health. And as we conclude, I'm just going to ask if my co-chair has any final remarks, but thank you.
Now, I also would like to thank you for this is truly a very, very inspiring talk. And I think your approach of being able to recognize history, learn from history, not so much because you want to be bitter, but wants to improve it so that history would not repeat itself. And your emphasis on being not only inclusive, but also being excellent. I think it is something that the message that we need to continue to carry, because definitely in medicine, in healthcare, we do see that. You have to balance the two, and you have to continue to maintain the high level. But I think this is truly an inspirational talk. I look forward to seeing you in New Orleans and listen to you again at that time.
And I look forward. Dr. Lim is an expert, and I'm going to be speaking to the Society of Dermatologists of Color in New Orleans. He's going to give me some points that I can make. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm going to challenge MSU. Harvard and Michigan and Stanford are on my campus at UMBC recruiting kids of all races all the time. I would love to see more of you. I'm no longer there, but I would love to see more of MSU there. To get, all right, you should, and I can connect you with the right. Our new president there, and I'm really proud of her, is, again, I was the first African-American. She was the Dean of Arts and Sciences at Duke. She is a polymer chemist and excellent, but I would love to see MSU recruiting more of my students. They represent the best of all races.
We do that.
They are some nerdy, wonderful kids. They really Thank you all very much.
Thank you for being with us.
The one line I always tell people at the end, keep hope alive. It's so important for America, for MSU right now, to keep hope alive. It's so important. Thank you.
We have a gift for you.
Oh, wow.
On behalf of our partnership, we wanted to thank you for being here. And now you can take us with you as you go.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I love it.
All right, thank you all. Thank you all online so much for joining us. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.